So Tristan, let's say happy Friday for those that are checking in on launch day of this particular episode of the Landlord Page podcast. And today we're going to get stuck into 3 fantastic case studies of investments that have come from clients actually listening to this podcast and following you on your buy to let of the week examples. So in reality, we're going to talk about 3 finance and forget perfect case studies. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk to you about, just from a bit of sourcing and conversational activity you have with property investors when they first reach out to you. What are the typical questions you get asked, and how do you help guide them through that first stage process?
I think the number one question I always get asked is, where do I buy?
Yep.
The obvious answer, of course. I think it really comes down to a few different things which we've discussed in previous podcasts, is how much money you've got to work with, what your end goal is. So we sort of narrow down that first in terms of what their plan of action is. Is it a short-term, long-term? Obviously, you only really want to work with a long-term investment because that's what property is. It's for the long-term gain.
Yeah.
So depending on budget will depend on what they can purchase as well. And then depend on that will depend on what area they go for as well. So we cover the home counties. Typically Berkshire is my sort of core area, I should say. So I know the market well there. We know what the growth is. We know what the demand is. So it's the ideal investment for us locally. But those that don't have the budgets for that, we can look further afield. Like, as we've covered before, you can go up north for a better yield, but the return sort of capital appreciation you get on that over a 10-year period is going to be far less, which is, it depends on what you're looking for. So they're the main sort of things, is where do I invest? How much do I need to spend? What am I going to make, basically?
Yeah.
And then answering any questions that may have at the back of it, or any concerns that maybe I've had some people that's called up because of specifically the podcast to say, I've had a load of cash sat there in the bank, been thinking of what to do with it, been listening to your podcasts. What do you suggest? Talking through it, and so here we are today.
The 2 sort of recent clients that I think we spoke to one of them together, and I spoke to one of them on my own yesterday. We've got the husband and wife that have gone, basically, we've got a ton of equity in our house now. Prices have gone up significantly over the last 2 years. I think they've been there for 7 or 8 years themselves. So they've done well out of their home residence. Business is going well. Savings are going well. Kids are growing up. And they're now looking at property as a way to pension plan effectively, and almost future-proof their finances for the future of their kids and for themselves when it comes to retirement. So they've remortgaged a chunk of cash out of their property. They're looking to get some finance, obviously, to go alongside that, and potentially buy 2 or 3 properties over the next 18 months, which just makes a ton of sense when you look at it. And that's a perfect case study of an example of a new property investor in the market. And then yesterday I spoke to clients of mine that are actually 2 business owners. Business is now, I think, 7 or 8 years as well in play. They've got a nice kind of chunk of cash in the business pot, and they're looking to set up an SPV and buy as a limited company, as a sort of piggyback off of their current limited company, get some finance because the company's got good credit rating, and individually as directors of that business, they've got good credit rating, and basically go 50-50. 50 cash, 50 loan, and both sets of those investors are really looking for that finance and forget approach. Everyone's kind of, I guess, time poor in that generational bracket of the new property investors that are actively looking to get involved. And I'd say if you were specifying a demographic, you'd probably say low 30s up to mid 40s. I think that's that new investing bracket that we're talking about. And they've got time on their hands to do stuff with the family and business, but not an extra side hustle. And that's where we come into play. So one of the first properties that we've done recently is actually a straightforward flat. And this particular flat that was purchased, there was a conversation had with an investor that we knew very well, and his business has had a really good year. And effectively he said, look, I've got a chunk of cash, not significant amount of money. I think it was 70, 75 grand, something like that, in the business account, which is effectively spare. And I'm wondering what I should do with it. And that's where we had the conversation then with him about, well, why not invest it in property, and let's see the rate of returns you can get from it. So as a case study, using the Crowthorne flat, what was the outcome? What was the property he bought? What was the price? What's the rent? What's the yield? And how much money is he making now?
Yeah, no, that was a great example, that one. So brought a 2-bedroom ground floor flat across the road from the station, some shops literally next door to it as well. So in terms of location, it's perfect. We basically let that immediately before he had actually completed on the property. And they were moving from overseas. So a friend viewed it on their behalf. They video called alongside some other viewings. They did have other offers as well. But we achieved the maximum price on that of £1,250 on
And
a
what did he buy it for?
255.
255, rent
So-
1250.
So a yield on a property of that is 5.8% gross. So
Solid.
it's good for a flat. And I think due to the location of that one, not every flat's the same. I think they all have their different selling points, but that one specifically was across you couldn't be any closer to the station.
Yeah.
But don't have the noise of a busy flat. It had a big living room, kitchen off of that, a massive hallway through the middle, plenty of storage space, 2 bathrooms and 2 good sized bedrooms, and the master bedroom's huge as well. Really
It's
good purchase, that
What,
one.
about 25 years old, probably, something like that, I would have
Yeah, in
thought.
the region of 25 years old, yeah. The seller had already painted the property, had tenants in there before that were paying £1,215. So he was already getting a good rental, but obviously the market's gone up since then. Repainted it, new carpets, the appliances were new already. So basically it was already what you call a plug and play property, basically.
Yeah.
EPC rating is pushing, I think it's a C, quite a mid-range C. So no works required come if legislation changed in 2025. So pretty much ready to go. So tenant moved in 2 weeks later.
Spare 70 grand in the business account, managed to turn it into a buy-to-let, purchased it just over £250,000. And I think from talking to him, he's now making after service charges, management charges, and obviously mortgage, somewhere in the region of about £650 a month profit on that particular property. So just a perfect example of a finance and forget. He doesn't want to deal with the management. He's just bought it, said yes, took our advice. He's quite happy making the 600 quid monthly profit, because let's be honest, 70 grand sat in your business account is not going to make you £600 a month.
Nope.
If anything, it's going to lose you £6 a month at this rate. So a really, really good example of just a simple case study there.
He is actually looking to buy another one. So we're on the look for another one, which is looking freehold this time. So the flat was first time, quick, got the money, and now he's got the bug and he wants something with equity growth on there as well.
Yeah, awesome. Great example of someone getting the confidence to see from using our experience and our knowledge, but also just our confidence building approach to a new investor. He's now got the bug and he's ready to go again. So the next case study, I think this is one that's actually going for at the moment, but it's a Bracknell 3-bedroom end of terrace, I believe, or a semi. Yeah. So again, I think this is a different type of business owner, but someone running their own business. They came to you directly. They've been, looking at your buy-to-lets of the week. They've been listening to the podcast. Probably wanted to do it, but didn't have the time or the confidence or the knowledge to know where to start, really, I think. So it was more telephone call with you. I want to do this. What do we do next? And it was as sort of vague as that, I think, the conversation initially.
Still exactly the same to this moment. I'm liaising with the sales, just finding out where we are with things. It was all the way from the start was I've got money. I've had a really good year. Been listening to the podcast, but want to invest in something. I've been seeing some of the gains that other people have had. What advice can you give me? He's on the look once again for another one now, even so this sale's not gone through, and is looking at upsizing and renting out his current property. So he's gone from buying one to potentially looking to buying another one and letting out his.
Yeah.
So that property is he's got that at a really good price. The market's obviously gone up since then. I had some people that missed out on another one, which we're going to talk about after. They loved the property. It was just the location didn't work for them. This is, in my opinion, a better location, but hence the reason they're paying more in money for the property. It has an integral garage as well and driveway parking. The owners have really looked after it. They've repainted, put a modern bathroom in there. Kitchen's not massively modern, but it's livable and it's neutral, so there's no opinion on that. Obviously, it'd be nice to have a more modern one, but it's not needed.
Yeah.
A few minor bits of work to do in there. So one of the rooms is quite dark. They've asked for it to be painted a neutral colour, and the decking in the garden, there's a few broken bits of decking which need replacing, but very minor stuff that can be done. We had a one-off viewing there a couple of weeks ago. Before the mortgage offer had gone out.
For a tenant?
For a tenant. We'd been waiting a couple of weeks, but we was pretty much there. That person fell in love with the property. They've got until July to move in. The sellers need a quick sale anyway, so it's due to exchange and complete very soon. But I've got a tenant lined up for that at 1,500, which is great. The sellers obviously delighted because it helps them know that the sale is progressing for them to buy their new build.
Yeah.
And the buyer's filled with confidence knowing that he's got a tenant lined up for straight after they complete at a maximum price of 1,500.
So the seller's happy because they've got the confidence that their buyer, your client, the property investor, has already found a tenant.
Yep.
If it all coincides timescales wise. The landlord, the new landlord, is happy because he knows there's a tenant, there's rent to go in, and the tenant below is happy because they know they've seen it off market and they've got a property secured, which is the opposite of how normally an estate agent would work because it needs to be a tick box exercise. In this case, just common sense from start to finish. Everyone's happy. It's a freehold. I actually think it's a fantastic price that he's got that property for now. And down the line, on the day of completion, you could probably hand the keys over and say, well done, you've made 15 grand on that one, I would say at least. So all around, happy people, and a perfect example of another property, finance and forget. He can get involved if he wants to get involved with the garden bits and bobs. And yeah, tenants happy, landlords happy, sellers happy. That's what buying property is about as a property investor. It's not always about looking for the phenomenal deal. It's about being able to strike when a chain breaks, which is what happened in this one. Take advantage, get in there, get yourself a good freehold family home, and that will be a fantastic long-term asset for that particular landlord.
But there's no stress involved either if you think about it. So buying is a stressful process, moving is a stressful process. But when you cross all the dots together, having everything in place just makes it so much smoother. The tenant loves what we do because they've been viewing, they said they've missed out on so many properties. The videos we do, obviously, showing the sales details initially, said, look, I've got this potentially coming up. So it's already a conversation weeks before. They loved that. And I said, look, do a drive-by. They went to the property, had a drive-by outside, loved the location. So they love the process as well because they're not being outbid by other people or missing out, which is what's been happening.
Yeah.
And like I said, it fills the landlord with confidence because we know exactly what needs to be done in there in terms of compliance, what works are required. So all of that's lined up. So the moment it happens, that work will be done and that tenant moves in. Such a smooth transition. Whereas if we wait till the completion, no tenant lined up, get the stuff done because it's going to need to be done anyway. It's all standard stuff. Then you've got the void period for that period of time of that, then the marketing, it's just like a wasted window.
Yeah.
And then
Everyone's
having to worry
losing.
about the mortgage.
Yeah, everyone's losing, no one's happy, and it's just estate agents going down the tick box exercise, which is not needed. Third example of a property is purchase price at 340,000. So talk to me about this one.
So this was on with another local agent. I done buy to let of the week on this one. Been speaking to the investor for about 4 weeks, sending me multiple messages, sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night, saying the usual, in from work, been looking on Rightmove, what do you think of this, what do you think of that? Sent some reports back, said, look, don't go with that one. This one I'd stay away from. That's a good one. That's sold way over asking price. Didn't even get a chance to see it. And then they seen this one. I said, look, that one's nice, but if you was to do that, yes, it's less than the other ones, but that's because it needs a new kitchen, it needs some new carpets, it needs a new repaint and so forth. She's like, look, I'm open to the work on that. It's not a problem, just whether it's the right one. A property had let nearby to there within the month of them looking at that for 1,500, but historically they were all sort of 1350, but nothing recently had let there specifically. Went out to view it, offered on the property, had it accepted. I went back a few weeks later with the sellers in situ, with the new buyer, had a walk round, went through the works in person of what needed to be done. So she'd already planned to what needed to be done prior. And rather than replace the kitchen, what she done was she went in and got some nice paint that was specifically for the units and repainted all like the cabinets.
She just uplifted.
Basically, just freshened it up, basically.
Yeah.
And she made it look a hell of a lot better than what it did. And you'll see, if you go on our Facebook page, you'll see the photos. And I've got some before photos, which I can send. And the transformation was massive. So she didn't technically need to spend the money on the kitchen, though it would have been nice. But she said, look, I don't have the money now. Let me recoup some money from the rent, and then I'll look to do it in the future.
Yeah.
But as it stands, this is what I plan to do. No problem. Done that, painted the house herself, so it's minimal cost for her. It was just her time, but she had the time to do it. And then got new carpets upstairs as well. Along the way, we did find out that the electrics failed, but it was sort of expected because there was loads of drop-down lights throughout, and you could just see that potentially so it's going to flag up. So that was probably the biggest cost for her, is doing the new electrics throughout to pass the ICR. And then in the garden, there was like a decking area that all had to be ripped up because it was all broken and rotten, and that's all been replaced. But that's where it gets the sun. You're going to spend a lot of time over there.
And she's spending the money, but making the money on the actual sort of overall valuation.
But she's reduced the cost as well because she's done it herself.
And what was her situation? What was the reason for her investing? Was she using business cash? Was she using savings?
So that was savings they had. So they obviously lived in their family home and just had some cash sat there, and just said, we might as well we've got kids, let's start growing a portfolio to then pass down to them in the future. So it's a long-term thing for them as well. Buy the one, see how it goes. So there's potential of more, but I think it's been a positive response to her as well. So that was bought at 340 for that. We achieved 1450 in rent, which is £50 more than I said you'd probably achieve on that. We did have 1500, but unfortunately, due to referencing, it went back on the market. But that would just come down to my professional experience of saying, let's not go with these, let's find better tenants, which we've done. And they've moved in at a maximum rent on a 2-year tenancy.
Yeah, I love it. Love the case studies. We wanted to share that with our listeners because other people are reaching out to us. If you've listened to a load of our podcasts and not reached out with us yet, we'd love to have a conversation with the people listening. If it's the first time listening and you think, you know what, one of those examples really sort of hits home with what I'm about and what I'm looking to do, give us a shout because we can help you get over the hurdles without you going through the stress. And as we can see there, we got the top 3 really simple kind of finance and forget options, 3 case studies, 3 investors, 3 properties. And for us, there'll be many more of those. Like we say, we've got a couple of, up to about 10 different clients we're working with at the moment that will become buy-to-lets or have buy-to-lets that are looking for more buy-to-lets. And if you're one of those people and you'd like just our advice on a property you're looking to buy and you want us to use one of our back-end systems to give you a report and lowdown on it, then we're always happy to chat with landlords. Even if you don't use us, we'd still love to have a conversation with you. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed that episode of the podcast, those 3 case studies. We'll do this again in a couple of weeks' time and share some more because there's some more in the pipeline that we're looking for. And if anyone's got any questions at all, reach out to me, Mike or Tristan. And thanks so much for listening or watching the Landlord Page podcast. I'm flicking through YouTube and through Spotify. I don't think there's a podcast or a video channel on YouTube that landlords can land on where they're not being sold something.
I mean, it'd be the first time any estate agents ever asked that question, but why not ask that question to a wider audience?
Estate agents have the knowledge there, but they don't seem to share it.
You can do different episodes based around someone that wants an exit plan or someone that's just starting their portfolio.
The rules change every year.
Yeah.
But why not just open the floor out and just say, well, is property even the best investment out there?
And tax advice is a big thing, especially with everything that's changed, capital gains tax and obviously your stamp duty costs that you need to pay and whatnot. People don't realise what they need to prepare for.
We build a podcast and we build a YouTube channel, somewhere that landlords can go and they feel they're not being sold to, but they're just getting quality advice.